The best way to understand communication is to see it graphically. Many authors and researchers have come up with their own models based on what they want to emphasize as being an important component of communication. In today's lesson, we are going to tackle about the communication models made by different authors and researchers. And then we are going to identify which elements is or are they giving emphasis to, or which element or components is the most important in that model. So we are going to compare and contrast the different models that will be discussed in this video. But first, let us first know the three basic categories of communication models. We have linear, interactive, and transactional. First, let us know what is linear. Linear model views communication as one way or linear process in which the speaker speaks and the listener listens. So in linear model, it says that it shows that in this model, the sender is the only one who sends the message and the receiver only receives the message. Now we have different models under linear. First, we have Aristotle's model. So, one of the earliest recorded models is attributed to Aristotle, which is an ancient Greek philosopher. Let's look at this image. So, this shows the model of Aristotle. So, we have the speaker, the speech, the audience, and the effect. But he focuses on the speaker and the message. So this communication is seen as verbal activity. So based on verbal activity, which is through spoken conversation or spoken speeches. And this model is a speaker-centered model. So Aristotle focused on the speaker and the message as the most important part of his model. But actually, the most important part of this model is the setting where the listener is situated. It is the setting that dictates the message. So the three settings in Aristotle's time were legal, deliberative, and ceremonial. The legal setting meant the courts where ordinary people defended themselves. There were no lawyers back then. So the deliberative setting meant the political assemblies, the highest of which was the Roman Senate. The ceremonial setting meant the celebrations held when they won a war, when they lost a leader or they had a new one, and when they welcomed a visiting leader from another kingdom or another country. Such occasions called for speeches of welcome, poems, tribute, or of eulogies and poems of lament. So, in Tagalog, ang Aristotle model ay nagbibigay ng importansya or mas binibigyang focus ang speaker. Dahil noong panahon ni Aristotle, madalas sila nagkakaroon ng speeches o kaya ng mga kaso sa court at ng pagbibigay-pugay o seremonya. At doon niya binase ang model na yon, ang model niya ng communication kung saan ang speaker ang siyang nagbibigay ng message at ang audience ay nakikinig lamang. Next model is Laswell's model. Laswell's communication model is same as Aristotle's, but Laswell's focuses on the oral message, emphasizing the terms such as speaker or communicator, the message, the audience, and the medium. And the most important part is the effect. But even though he uses different terminology and but he sees also communication as unidirectional process or linear process, in which the individual influences the others with his or her message. The point is, in this idea or in this model or in Laswell's idea, there must be an effect if communication takes place. So otherwise, communication breakdowns happens. So in this model, if he says here or he he's trying to say here that if we have communicated, we have motivated or produced an effect to the receiver. If the sender sends a message and the message was received by the receiver should experience or should experience an effect based on the message of the sender. Okay, so it is based on mass communication, meaning there is a wide audience, and if we have communicated, we have motivated or produced an effect. That is the main point of this model. Next, we have Shannon-Weaver model. Claude Shannon and Warren Weaver model gave us the concept of noise, as you can see in this image. So this is often called the telephone model because it is based on the experience of having the message interfered with by noise from the telephone switchboard back in the 1940s. Claude Shannon and Warren Weaver was they were a worker of a telephone company back then. So they have based this model to how communication happens in telephone. In this model, Shannon and Weaver asserts that the message sent by the source or the speaker is not necessarily the message received by the destination. This is due to the intervention of noise or anything that hampers or interferes the communication. Even today, with our advanced cell phone technology, there are still barriers to clear transmission and reception of calls. Drop calls, calls that echo, or faint signals, it all interfere with the communication of the message. So it is based on a telephone model and it emphasizes the concept of noise. Again, when we say Shannon Weaver, it emphasizes or it introduces the concept of noise. Next, we have Berlow's model or the SMCR model. So, this model of communication is described as the factors affecting the individual components in the communication. So in this model, he describes what affect the individual in having communication or in making communication and what makes the communication more efficient. So in this model or in Berlow's model of communication, it has four components. We have the sender, the message, the channel, and the receiver, which are all influenced by many external and internal factors as you can see under the components. First component, we have the sender. It is the one who sends the message. The sender's ability to send the message accurately to the receiver is influenced by his communication skills or his ability to write, to speak, to listen effectively. Next, it is also affected by his attitude or the way the sender perceived himself or herself and the receiver of the message. Next, it is also affected by his knowledge, how much the sender knows about the subject of the message. Next, he or the source is also affected by his social system or the factors governed by the sender's religion, beliefs, values, and other social factors, including the place and situation of the communication event. And lastly, of course, the sender is affected by his culture or the set of values, belief system shared by the people in a community. Meaning, the source is affected by different components or different different elements. Next, we have the message. So this refers to the idea or information being sent by the sender to the receiver. As in the case of the sender, the message can also be affected by many factors. These are first the content, the substance of the message. Next, the elements, the nonverbal aspects of the message, such as hand gestures, facial expressions, and language. Next, the treatment, the way the message was delivered. How was the message was delivered? Next, the structure, the arrangement or organization of the message. And last is the code. So, the form of the message. So, is it through text? Is it through video, or is it orally face to face, or do we use different medium? Next, the channel, it is the medium used to transmit the message. So, technology has many affordance for the message to be transmitted. For example, we have telephone, television, internet, and the like. But generally, humans, transmit our message through our five senses. We have the hearing, seeing, touching, smelling, and tasting, and also speaking. And lastly, the receiver is also affected, or the receiver who gets the message is also affected by different components, just like the sender. So, aside from good listening skills, the same factor that affect the sender also affect the listener. Like the way he understand or receive the message is affected by his communication skills, by his attitudes, by his knowledge, his social system, and his culture. So again, the sender's ability to send the message accurately affects the source. The message is the idea of information being sent by the sender to the receiver, which is affected by content, the elements, the treatment, the structure, and the code. And the channel is the medium used to transmit the message, and the receiver is the one who gets the message. And this SMCR are being influenced by the different elements that is written under them. Next, let us go to interactive. So this is interactive. So the main flaw in the linear model is that it depicts communication as a one-way process only, where speakers only speak and never listen. So it also implies that listeners listen and never speak or send message. Now in linear or in interactive communication model, it shows here that the receiver or the listener can provide feedback to the sender or the speaker. So in this model, the receiver doesn't only receive, but he or she can also send feedback. Now let us go to the model under interactive. We have the Schramm's model. Schramm's model came out with a more interactive model that saw the receiver or listener providing feedback to the sender or the speaker. The speaker or sender of the message also listens to the feedback given by the receiver or the listener. So both the speaker and the listener take turns to speak and to listen to each other. Feedback is given either verbally or non-verbally or in both ways. So this model also indicates that the speaker and listener communicate better if they have field of experience or fields which overlap. But what is field of experience? So it is everything that makes a person unique, everything he or she has ever learned, watched, seen, heard, read, and studied. In other words, it is everything a person has ever experienced or not experienced, done or not done. In fact, this is practically everything that has happened in his or her life. It is the field of experience that is used to interpret the message and create a response. It is also this field of experience of the listener that needs to overlap with the speaker's field of experience, which can only happen when the two fields have commonalities. For example, the teacher must deliver his or her lecture in either English or Filipino because that is the language the students know and use. If the teacher suddenly started using Chinese in the lecture, the students will not understand a single thing. The teacher may perhaps be understood only if he or she was teaching in Chinese school. In Tagalog, Schramm's model ang Schramm's model ay nagbibigay ng importansya sa field of experience. Ano ba yung field of experience? Ito ang bumubuo sa atin. Ito ang ating past, ang ating natutunan, lahat ng kung ano ang meron tayo. So, kailangan daw ang receiver at ang sender ay may pagkakapareho ng field of experience para magkaroon sila ng communication. Kagaya na lamang ng binigay kanina, kung ang teacher ay nagtuturo sa Filipino students, dapat siya ay magsalita ng English o Filipino para maintindihan siya ng student. So, kailangan nag-overlap yung field of experience nila. So, kung nagturo si teacher ng Filipino, ng gamit ang Filipino or English na language, matututunan yon ng student dahil pareho silang marunong mag-English or Filipino. Pero kung bigla na lang nagsalita si teacher ng Chinese, hindi maiintindihan ni teacher. So, hindi nag-overlap yung field of experience nila. So, again, in Schramm's model, it gives emphasis to the field of experience, which means that the field of experience of the sender and the receiver should overlap. Again, communication can take place if and only if there is an overlap between the sender and receiver's field of experience. And, okay, again, it gives importance to the field of experience. Now, let us go to the transactional model. The transactional model shows that the elements in communication are independent or interdependent. Each person in the communication act is both a speaker and a listener and can be simultaneously sending and receiving messages. So, in interactive, the receiver can give feedback. But in transactional model, the sender can become the receiver and the receiver could become the sender simultaneously. Let's look at this image. Okay, so in this image or in this model, communication can communicators can both send and receive messages simultaneously. It shows a transactional model of communication that takes into account noise or interference in communication as well as the time factor. The outer lines of the model indicate that communication happens within system that both communication shares. So this outer lines, so it shows that the communication happens within a system that both communication shares. For example, common campus, common hometown, or culture, or personal system like family, religions, or friend. So it also takes into account changes that happen in communicators' field of experience or fields of personal and common experiences. The model also labels each communicator as both sender as well as receiver simultaneously. So in this transactional model, again, the sender could be the receiver and the receiver could be the sender. Okay, this is the most general model of communication. Now let us find out what model is under transactional. We have the helical model. The helical model is known also as dance model. So it takes the shape of a helix, which symbolizes continuity, progress, and accumulation. From the structure, it illustrated in the model of dance, the direction and movement of the lines indicate flexibility in the communication process. The connectedness of the past to the present is clearly indicated. This implies that communication is a continuously moving activity where everything that has occurred in the past contributes to the present event. So, this means that the present communicative experience that you have is a result of learned experience, which help develop an individual's meaningful and social orientation of self. Meaning that is why it is in helix because communication is continuous. Meaning what you have learned in the past about communication or b- as a communicator, you use it to become better communicator. That's why it widens. So again, let us let us um try to let us summarize what is the lesson for today. Again, our major communication model, we have the linear, the interactive, and the transactional. When we say linear, the sender sends the message and it is received by the receiver. In interactive, the message is sent by the sender and received by the receiver, and the receiver gives feedback. When we say transactional, the message is sent by the sender, received by the receiver, and then the receiver will become the sender and will send a message to the receiver, and then the receiver will become the sender again that will send a message to the receiver. So the sender and the receiver can be both become the sender and the receiver simultaneously. So that's it. If you have question, you can PM me and please do the activities that is given or that is in your in vSmart or in our LMS.